The sketch in the shadows. The fluorescent lights of Sterling Tech Tower cast harsh shadows across the marble floors as Mira Chen pushed her cleaning cart down the empty corridor. It was nearly midnight, and the 32nd floor hummed with the quiet energy of sleeping computers and abandoned coffee cups. She moved efficiently between the offices, her movements practiced after 3 years of night shift cleaning. At 26, Mira had grown accustomed to being invisible. During the day, this building buzzed with software engineers, marketing executives, and tech innovators who changed the world with lines of code. At night, it belonged to people like her, the custodial staff who kept the dream machine running while dreaming their own quiet dreams. She paused at the break room, glancing at the large windows that offered a stunning view of the city's glittering skyline. Somewhere out there, people were using apps and software that had been born in these very offices. Mira often wondered what it would feel like to create something that millions of people carried in their pockets, something that made their lives easier or brought them joy. Setting down her spray bottle, Mira pulled out her worn laptop, a 7-year-old machine she'd bought secondhand with money saved from countless extra shifts. The screen flickered to life, revealing lines of code that had consumed her thoughts for months. While other people binged Netflix or scrolled through social media, Mira taught herself programming through free online courses and coding forums. Her fingers flew across the keyboard as she refined her latest project, an app called Community Bridge. It was designed to connect local communities with resources they needed, allowing neighbors to share skills, tools, and support. A retired teacher could offer tutoring, a handyman could help with repairs, and busy parents could organize carpools, all through an intuitive platform that felt more like a friendly neighborhood than a cold digital interface. The app wasn't just code to Mira, it was hope translated into algorithms. Growing up in a low-income neighborhood, she'd seen how communities thrived when people looked out for each other. But modern life had created barriers. People didn't know their neighbors, couldn't find help when they needed it, or didn't know how to offer their own skills to others. Her phone buzzed with a text from her roommate. "You're working too late again. Come home and get some sleep." Mira smiled, knowing Jade worried about her burning out. But these quiet hours were precious, the only time she could focus entirely on building something meaningful. As she coded, Mira imagined the day when she might walk through these same halls as an employee, rather than someone who cleaned up after employees. She pictured herself in meetings, presenting ideas, collaborating with teams to solve problems that mattered. It seemed impossible sometimes, especially when she caught glimpses of the computer science degrees hanging on office walls, or overheard conversations about complex projects she could barely follow. But impossibility had never stopped her before. She'd worked her way through community college while supporting her younger brother. She'd learned English well enough to help her parents navigate bureaucracy and medical appointments. She'd taught herself skills that others paid thousands to learn in university programs. The cleaning cart's squeaky wheel reminded her that she still had 4 more floors to finish before dawn. Mira saved her work, closed the laptop, and returned to the familiar rhythm of emptying trash cans and wiping down desks. Each surface she cleaned belonged to someone living their dream in the daylight hours. Soon, she promised herself, she'd be ready to step out of the shadows and into the light. When words cut deep, the elevator hummed softly as it carried Mira to the executive floor, the 38th level where Sterling Tech's most important decisions were made. She rarely cleaned up here, but tonight the regular custodian had called in sick, and Mira needed the overtime pay. Her laptop bag felt heavier than usual, weighted down by the presentation slides she'd been perfecting for weeks. As she stepped into the mahogany-paneled hallway, voices drifted from the corner conference room. The lights were still on, unusual for this time of night. Mira hesitated, checking her watch. 12:47 a.m. She could come back later, but her shift ended at 6 a.m., and she still had 12 floors to cover. She knocked gently and pushed open the glass door. "Excuse me, I just need to empty the trash, and what are you doing here?" The voice was sharp, authoritative. Mira looked up to see a tall man in an expensive navy suit, his dark hair slightly disheveled from what appeared to be a long meeting. She recognized him immediately. Adrian Cross, Sterling Tech's 34-year-old CEO, whose face graced the covers of business magazines and tech blogs. "I'm sorry, sir. I'm with the cleaning crew. I can come back later if you're still—" "No, it's fine." Adrian waved dismissively, turning back to the three other executives seated around the conference table. Charts and graphs were scattered across the polished surface, and Mira could see the tension in their faces. "We're trying to figure out why our mobile division is hemorrhaging users. 3 years and $50 million, and we still can't crack the community engagement space." Mira moved quietly around the room, emptying wastebaskets and wiping down surfaces while trying not to listen. But she couldn't help noticing the screenshots on their laptops. Failed app interfaces that looked cold and corporate. Nothing like the warm, intuitive design she'd been crafting. As she reached for the trash bin near Adrian's chair, her laptop bag slipped from her shoulder, spilling its contents across the floor. Her notebook fell open, revealing sketches of user interface designs and handwritten code snippets. "What's all this?" Adrian picked up one of her wireframe drawings, his eyebrows raised in amusement. The other executives, 2 men in their 40s and a woman with silver hair, leaned in to look. Mira's cheeks burned as she quickly gathered her papers. "It's nothing, just personal projects. Personal projects." Adrian's tone was mocking now, and his associates chuckled. "What kind of personal projects does a janitor have? Let me guess, you're designing the next Facebook?" The woman executive, whose nameplate read Victoria Sterling, snorted. "Everyone thinks they can be a tech entrepreneur these days. Probably watched one too many Silicon Valley movies." Mira's hands trembled as she stuffed her work back into the bag, but Adrian held on to one of her sketches. "Community Bridge," he read aloud. "An app to connect neighbors and share resources. How quaint." He showed it to the others, who smiled condescendingly. "Sir, could I please have that back?" Mira stood up, her voice barely steady. "I'm curious," Adrian continued, ignoring her request. "What makes you think someone who empties trash cans could understand the complexities of software development? Do you have any idea how much we've invested in solving this exact problem?" The room fell silent except for the hum of the air conditioning. Mira felt the familiar weight of being dismissed, of having her dreams treated like childish fantasies. She'd faced this before. Professors who suggested she wasn't computer science material, classmates who assumed she was only in tech classes because of diversity programs, employers who saw her accent and presumed incompetence. But something was different tonight. Maybe it was the months of sleepless nights spent coding, or the countless rejections that had only made her more determined. Maybe it was seeing her own solution to their $50 million problem dismissed without consideration. Mira straightened her shoulders and looked directly at Adrian. Her voice, when it came, was calm and clear. "Dreams don't ask for permission based on your job title, Mr. Cross. They don't care if you clean floors or sit in corner offices. They only ask one thing. Are you brave enough to pursue them even when everyone tells you they're impossible?" The silence that followed was deafening. Victoria Sterling's smirk faded. The other executives shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. "Your app failed," Mira continued, her confidence growing, "because you built it for users you don't understand. You created what you thought communities needed, not what they actually want. Sometimes the best solutions come from people who've lived the problems you're trying to solve." Adrian's expression had changed from amusement to something harder to read, surprise, perhaps, or annoyance at being challenged by someone he considered beneath him. "That's enough," he said coldly, handing back her sketch. "I think you have floors to clean." Mira tucked the paper into her bag and picked up her cleaning supplies. As she reached the door, she turned back one final time. "The janitor who empties your trash cans taught herself 4 programming languages and has a prototype that could save your mobile division. But you'll never see it, because you've already decided what people like me are capable of." She left them sitting in stunned silence, the weight of her words hanging in the air like a challenge none of them knew how to answer. The unexpected discovery. 3 days had passed since the encounter in the conference room, but Adrian Cross couldn't shake Mira's words from his mind. They followed him through board meetings, buzzed in his thoughts during his morning runs, and kept him staring at the ceiling long after he should have been asleep. You built it for users you don't understand. The accusation stung because it felt uncomfortably close to the truth. Sterling Tech's community engagement app, Connect Local, had been developed by a team of Ivy League graduates who lived in upscale neighborhoods and had never needed to ask a neighbor for help. They'd conducted focus groups and analyzed user data, but had they ever actually lived in the communities they were trying to serve? Adrian found himself taking routes through the office that led past the janitorial supply closet, hoping to catch another glimpse of the young woman who'd had the audacity to lecture him about his own business. But the night shift was a different world, and their paths didn't cross again. On Friday evening, as most of his employees headed home for the weekend, Adrian made an impulsive decision. He rode the elevator down to the 32nd floor and approached the facilities manager, a gruff man named Pete who'd worked at Sterling Tech for over a decade. "That woman who's been covering the executive floors this week," Adrian said casually. "What's her story?" Pete raised an eyebrow. "Mira? She's one of our best. Works double shifts sometimes, never complains, always volunteers for the tough assignments. Been here about 3 years. Why? Just curious? She seems different. Different how?" Pete's tone carried a protective edge that surprised Adrian. "Smart. Articulate." Pete snorted. "You think smart people can't clean offices? Mira's got more brains than half the executives in this building. She helps her co-workers with their citizenship papers, translates documents for families in her neighborhood, tutors kids in math and science. If life had dealt her a different hand, she'd probably be running her own company by now." The comment hit Adrian like a punch to the gut. That night, he found himself unable to focus on the quarterly reports spread across his home office desk. Instead, he kept thinking about Mira's notebook, the careful sketches, the handwritten code, the passion evident in every line. By Sunday, curiosity had evolved into obsession. Adrian drove to Sterling Tech, using his keycard to access the building in the pre-dawn hours. He told himself he was just going to catch up on work, but his feet carried him to the 32nd floor, where he found Mira's cleaning cart parked outside a conference room. She was inside, laptop open on the table, fingers flying across the keyboard. In the glow of the screen, her face was transformed. Gone was the cautious deference she'd shown in their previous encounter, replaced by intense focus and quiet joy. Adrian watched from the doorway, struck by the realization that this was what passion looked like. When was the last time he'd felt that absorbed in his work? When had he last created something purely because he believed in it, rather than because market research suggested it would be profitable? "Working late again?" he said softly. Mira jumped, her hand flying to her chest. "Mr. Cross!" "I didn't hear you come in. I can put this away." "No, don't." Adrian stepped into the room, his hands raised in a peaceful gesture. "I'm sorry I startled you. And I'm sorry about the other night. I was unnecessarily harsh." Mira's eyes narrowed with suspicion. "Did someone complain?" "Because I wasn't supposed to be using the conference room, I know, but I was careful not to disturb anything. No one complained. I came here looking for you, actually." Adrian pulled out a chair across from her. "I couldn't stop thinking about what you said. About building for users we don't understand." For a long moment, Mira just stared at him. Then, slowly, she closed her laptop. "Why?" "Because our app is failing, and I think you might know why." Adrian leaned forward. "Would you show me what you've been working on? Not as your boss, not as someone who's going to steal your ideas. Just as someone who's curious about what passion looks like when it meets purpose." Mira hesitated, her fingers drumming against the laptop case. "You really want to see it?" "I do." She reopened the laptop and turned it toward him. "This is Community Bridge. It's designed around the idea that every neighborhood is like an extended family. You know your immediate neighbors well. You're acquainted with others, and you help each other out when needed." As Mira walked him through her prototype, Adrian felt his skepticism evaporating. The interface was intuitive and warm, with features that addressed real problems he'd never considered. There was a skill-sharing marketplace where a retired teacher could offer tutoring in exchange for help with grocery shopping, a resource library where neighbors could lend tools, books, or equipment, a community board for local events, safety alerts, and group activities. But what impressed Adrian most wasn't just the functionality, it was the heart behind it. Every feature had been designed with empathy, born from Mira's own experiences of community and mutual support. The secret, Mira explained, isn't in the technology. It's in understanding that people want to feel connected, valued, and useful. Your app treated users like consumers. Mine treats them like neighbors. When she finished, Adrian sat back in his chair, stunned. This wasn't just good, it was revolutionary. And it had been created by someone working night shifts to pay rent, coding on a laptop older than most of his employees' cars. Mira, he said quietly, I owe you an apology, and I think Sterling Tech owes you an opportunity. The leap of faith, the Sterling Tech boardroom had never felt more intimidating. Mira stood at one end of the polished conference table, her old laptop connected to the wall-mounted display, facing 12 of the company's top executives. Her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted her borrowed blazer, a gift from her roommate Jade, who'd insisted she needed to look the part. 2 weeks had passed since Adrian's midnight visit. 2 weeks of the most intense preparation of Mira's life. He'd arranged for her to take unpaid leave from her cleaning duties and provided access to Sterling Tech's development tools. She'd worked 18-hour days refining her prototype, preparing for this moment that felt both like a dream and a nightmare. Ladies and gentlemen, Adrian announced, I'd like you to meet Mira Chen, who's going to show us a different approach to community engagement platforms. Victoria Sterling, the silver-haired executive who'd mocked Mira's dreams 2 weeks earlier, looked distinctly uncomfortable. The head of mobile development, James Park, checked his phone with barely concealed impatience. Other faces around the table ranged from curious to skeptical. Ms. Chen, said Robert Hayes, the chief technology officer, I understand you're proposing an alternative to Connect Local. What's your background in software development? Mira's mouth went dry. She'd prepared for technical questions about her app, but not for an interrogation of her credentials. I'm self-taught. I've been coding for 4 years, working primarily with React Native, Node.js, and PostgreSQL. I've completed online certifications in self-taught, James interrupted with a condescending smile. How refreshing. I'm sure our team of Stanford and MIT graduates would love to hear what they've been doing wrong. Heat flooded Mira's cheeks. But before she could respond, Adrian's voice cut through the tension. James, let's focus on the solution, not the credentials. Some of history's greatest innovations came from people who thought differently because they learned differently. Mira took a deep breath, remembering her brother's advice. When they doubt you, let your work speak so loud they can't ignore it. You're right that I don't have a computer science degree, she said, her voice growing stronger. But I do have something your team might not. I've lived in the communities you're trying to serve. I've needed to borrow a cup of sugar, find a babysitter on short notice, and organize neighborhood watch groups. I've built this app not just from code, but from experience. She clicked to her first slide, a comparison of user engagement metrics. Connect Local has a 23% monthly retention rate. Apps in this space typically struggle because they treat community like a marketplace, transactional and cold. Community Bridge approaches it like what it actually is, a living network of relationships. As Mira walked through her presentation, the atmosphere in the room began to shift. She showed user interface mock-ups that were intuitive and welcoming, explained algorithms that prioritized local connections over broad networks, and demonstrated features that solved real problems rather than creating artificial needs. The trust verification system is particularly innovative, she continued. Instead of relying on anonymous ratings, it uses a web of trust model. Mrs. Johnson vouches for her neighbor Tom, who vouches for his friend Sarah, creating accountability chains that mirror how real communities work. Dr. Sarah Kim, the head of user experience, leaned forward with genuine interest. How do you handle privacy concerns with such interconnected data? Mira smiled. Finally, a question about the work itself rather than her qualifications. Great question. The system uses localized data clusters with encrypted bridges. Users control what information moves beyond their immediate network tier. It's like having a private conversation that can become public if you choose to make it so. For the next 20 minutes, Mira fielded technical questions with confidence and depth that surprised even herself. She explained her scaling architecture, outlined her monetization strategy, which prioritized community value over extraction, and addressed security protocols she'd researched obsessively. When she finished, the room fell silent. Victoria Sterling was the first to speak. The interface is impressive, clean, intuitive, nothing like the corporate sterility of our current platform. James Park, who'd started the meeting with skepticism, was now studying her code architecture on his tablet. The back-end structure is actually quite sophisticated. This trust network algorithm, where did you learn to build something like this? I didn't learn it, Mira admitted. I invented it. I spent 6 months researching social network theory, studying how communities actually form and maintain trust. Then I translated those patterns into code. Robert Hayes exchanged glances with Adrian. What would it take to develop this into a market-ready product? 6 months with a small team, Mira replied. I've already built the core functionality. We'd need to scale the infrastructure, conduct extensive security testing, and develop companion features for different community types. And you'd be willing to lead that development? Adrian asked. The question hung in the air like a challenge and a promise. Mira thought of her younger brother, who'd called her crazy for spending nights coding instead of sleeping, of her parents, who'd sacrificed everything to give their children better opportunities, of every person who'd ever told her to be realistic about her dreams. Yes, she said firmly, but not just as a contractor or consultant. I want to be part of this company's future, not just a solution to its current problem. Adrian smiled, the first genuine smile she'd seen from him. Then let's talk about making that happen. How does senior mobile developer sound for a start? The title hit Mira like lightning. 6 months ago, she'd been emptying trash cans on this same floor. Now she was being offered a position that could transform not just her own life, but potentially millions of others. It sounds, she said, her voice thick with emotion, like the beginning of something beautiful. Rewriting the rules. Dawn broke over Chicago with unseasonable warmth as Olivia entered her office building. Despite the summit's overnight success, Nexus Innovation was trending globally. She felt strangely empty. Sleep had been elusive, her mind replaying Dominic's words, his expression when she walked away. She unlocked her office and stopped short. On her desk sat a small unwrapped box and a handwritten letter. No elaborate gesture, no extravagant display, just simple, direct communication. Exactly what would matter most to her. The letter began without preamble. Olivia, you're right about my patterns. I acquire, perfect, move on. It's how I built an empire. It's also why, at 38, I have everything and nothing simultaneously. What you're wrong about is that you fit this pattern. You've never been an acquisition target. You're the disruption that revealed the flaws in my operating system. The enclosed isn't a gift. It's a return, something I've kept since I was 10 years old. The one rule I never break is that I never part with it. Until now. Dominic. The box contained an old brass compass, worn with age, its needle still finding true north despite the tarnished case. Taped to the bottom was a faded photo, a young boy with Dominic's serious eyes standing beside a woman in a factory uniform. Olivia's phone rang. Jasmine, already at the summit venue. You need to get here now. Something's happening with Vega. 40 minutes later, Olivia stood in the back of the main exhibition hall, watching Dominic take the stage for his keynote address. The audience of industry leaders, investors, and media fell silent as spotlights converged on the notoriously private billionaire. Welcome to the Nexus Innovation Summit, he began, his voice confident yet somehow different from his usual calculated delivery. Today we discuss the future of sustainable technology. But first I'm breaking my cardinal rule of public speaking. I'm going off script. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Olivia noticed Harriet and several board members exchanging alarmed glances. Nexus was built on a simple premise. Control creates certainty. I've applied that philosophy to every aspect of my life and business, Dominic continued. It's been remarkably effective for creating wealth. Less effective for creating meaning? The audience was rapt now. Dominic Vega never spoke personally at corporate events. Yesterday, someone challenged my pattern, questioned whether I'm capable of change. It's a valid concern. His eyes found Olivia's across the crowded room. So today, I'm announcing two things. First, Nexus is establishing a $50 million foundation for foster children transitioning to adulthood, focusing on educational opportunities and entrepreneurial mentorship. Applause erupted. Olivia felt her throat tighten, recognizing the direct connection to her own background. Second, Dominic continued as the room quieted, I'm restructuring Nexus leadership. Effective immediately, I'm stepping back as CEO to serve as executive chairman, focusing on innovation rather than operations. Gasps and urgent whispers spread through the audience. Financial reporters began typing frantically on their devices. For 15 years, I've maintained absolute control of every decision at Nexus. That ends today. Not because I've failed, but because I've succeeded enough to recognize what truly matters. His gaze remained fixed on Olivia. Sometimes our most fundamental rules exist not because they're correct, but because they protect us from what we fear most. Vulnerability, rejection, loss. The room had fallen completely silent, witnessing something unprecedented, Dominic Vega speaking from the heart. The greatest innovation isn't technological. It's the capacity to evolve beyond our own limitations. He straightened, transitioning back to business. Now, let me show you what Nexus has created to revolutionize energy storage. The remainder of his presentation was brilliant, visionary, exactly what everyone expected from the tech genius. But something fundamental had shifted. Everyone felt it. Afterward, as attendees networked and explored exhibits, Olivia stood on the venue's outdoor terrace, processing what she'd witnessed. The compass sat heavy in her pocket. Was that public enough for you? Dominic's voice came from behind her. Olivia turned. You restructured your entire company to make a point? To make a change, he corrected. One that was overdue regardless. He approached, but maintained a respectful distance. The compass was my grandfather's. When he died, it was the only thing I wanted. My one connection to someone who saw me as more than a problem or a prodigy. Why give it to me? Because you already have what it represents. Direction, integrity, the ability to find your way through any storm. His expression was open, vulnerable in a way she'd never seen. I've spent my life accumulating things I can control. You've spent yours creating experiences that help others navigate chaos. Olivia felt the careful walls around her heart crumbling. This doesn't solve anything, Dominic. We're still what? From different worlds? Too complicated professionally? He stepped closer. I'm not asking you to abandon your principles. I'm asking if there's room in them for evolution, for both of us. And if it doesn't work, then we'll have failed spectacularly at something authentic rather than succeeding at something hollow. He reached for her hand, his touch tentative. The morning after we met, you left me a note that said no strings, no regrets. I'm asking for the opposite now. All the strings, all the complications, a chance at something real. Chicago's skyline stretched before them, afternoon sun glinting off glass and steel, a city of ambition and possibility. Olivia felt something shifting within her, the careful order of her life rearranging into a new pattern. I don't need your grand gestures or public declarations, she said finally. Disappointment flickered across his face. What I need, she continued, is your patience, your honesty. The real Dominic, not the calculated version you show the world. Hope replaced disappointment. That's more terrifying than any business risk I've ever taken. Good, Olivia said, a smile finally breaking through. That makes us even. She reached into her pocket and pressed the compass back into his hand, closing his fingers around it. Keep this. We'll navigate together. His breath caught. Does that mean? It means I'm willing to explore the possibility, slowly, with clear communication and mutual respect. She moved closer, professional distance forgotten. I'm not abandoning my rules, Dominic. I'm revising them. Can you live with that? His answer came not in words, but in the way he drew her into his arms. His kiss, conveying what carefully crafted speeches could not. that some connections transcend the boundaries we create to protect ourselves, challenging us to write new rules for a life more extraordinary than we dared imagine alone. As the summit continued below them, celebrating innovation and progress, Olivia and Dominic remained on the terrace, two people discovering that the most revolutionary act isn't changing the world, it's allowing yourself to be changed by it. In the gentle spring breeze, the compass in Dominic's pocket pointed steadfastly north, while they began charting a course toward something neither had been seeking, yet both had somehow found.